Welcome to VL Podcast on the Visual Learners channel. Today we're shifting gears to a groundbreaking development in the housing industry. Yes, we are talking about Icon, which is building humanity's future with intelligent machines. But before we get started, a quick reminder to check out my channel Visual Learners for in-depth tutorials about deep learning topics and our segments. VL Extras for bite-sized explainers on the latest in AI and tech, and VL Podcasts, where we break down complex trends without making your brain overheat. Also, don't forget to check out my modern-themed portfolio website at Teddy VL Portfolio Vercel app, link in the description. Also, connect with me on social media for more updates. Now let's talk about Icon, a company that's making waves by building 3D printed homes in Texas using AI and robotics. Founded in 2017, Icon is based in Austin, Texas, and is led by co-founder and CEO Jason Ballard. Jason was born in 1982. Ballard's Wikipedia article mentions that he is a conservation biologist turned construction technology pioneer. What a turnaround. He is a graduate of Texas A&M University, where he studied conservation biology. He is currently enrolled in a master's program in space resources at Colorado School of Mines. That's not all. He is also the representative for the 12th District in the Virginia House of Delegates. Ballard assumed office on January 12, 2022. After being elected to represent the 12th District in November 2021. In the service of humanity, Jason Ballard has devoted his existence to addressing significant issues. Ballard has been recognized for his work with Icon by numerous organizations, including Fast Company, Wired, and Time magazine. He was named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world in 2022. Looks like this guy is well-rounded on all aspects. Ballard is a passionate advocate for using technology to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. He believes that 3D printing has the potential to revolutionize the way we build homes and other structures, making them more affordable, sustainable, and resilient. His most recent and noteworthy position was that of co-founder and chief executive officer of Icon, a company that employs large-scale 3D printing to resolve the global housing crisis and prepare for extraterrestrial colonization while developing technology for the construction industry. Icon's mission is to revolutionize the construction industry by using advanced technologies to address the global housing crisis. They've developed a proprietary 3D printing system that uses a concrete-based material called lavacrete to construct homes. One of their most ambitious projects is the world's largest community of 3D printed homes in Georgetown, Texas, known as Wolf Ranch. This development is a collaboration between Icon, home building company Lenner, and Danish architecture firm Bjarke Ingels Group, BIG. The community will feature 100 homes, with the first residents expected to move in starting September. Okay, that's a lot. Now let's move over to our podcast hosts, where they will give you the deeds on all things Icon.
3D printers have come a long way, from making little knickknacks to full-on houses. A year ago, you guys might remember I toured this luxury 3D printed house.
But as incredible as this house is, there is a huge catch. It's not exactly affordable.
This house, called House Zero, was built by a company called Icon and is really a showcase of what 3D printing can do.
The thing you have to keep in mind with House Zero is that there are a lot of different textures going on here. There's a lot of concrete walls, but there's also probably just as much wood paneling, plaster, and tile. But the issue is adding all this paneling and plaster gets really expensive. For these homes to ever be affordable, we've got to see what they're like with just the concrete. I worry that if it's only concrete walls, it might feel a little bit cold. But today we're going to find out if it actually does.
Icon has been working on a development of 100 more affordable 3D printed houses 40 minutes outside of Austin.
You know, 3D printed homes, I always thought they were like straight out of science fiction. But then I saw this video of robots building houses in Texas, like layer by layer. And I knew we had to do a deep dive on this. We've got articles and YouTube videos. We even got a Wikipedia entry to really unpack this whole phenomenon. I mean, are these things really the future of housing? Or is it just hype?
Well, the future might be a little closer than you think, to be honest, because it's not just like experimental tech anymore. People are actually buying and living in these houses.
Okay, so you've been going through all these sources. What's the most surprising thing you've learned so far?
Honestly, it's the sheer range of things that are happening. Like, you've got companies like Icon, they're building entire neighborhoods in Texas, but they're also working with NASA on construction techniques for Mars. Then you've got like researchers in Europe who are experimenting with printing entire bridges out of recycled plastic. So it's like a global movement, and it's going way beyond just houses.
Okay, from Texas to Mars, that's pretty wild. But let's start with what's happening here on Earth. This video from The Telegraph, it takes us to a 3D printed neighborhood in Texas. What's the scene like there?
Well, imagine this, like giant robotic arm gliding along a track. It's like extruding concrete, almost like a high-tech pastry bag. Layer by layer, it just builds the walls of the house. And actually, it's not just any concrete. They use this special mix called lavacrete. It's designed specifically for 3D printing.
Lavacrete. That sounds fancy. What makes it so special?
Well, it's super strong and durable. And it sets really quickly, which is like crucial for 3D printing, right? Because you need each layer to solidify before the next one goes on top. And, in the video, one of the homeowners actually describes their 3D printed house as feeling like a fortress. They even said they'd feel safe riding out a tornado in it.
A concrete fortress. Okay, that's quite the visual. But let's back up a little bit. Talk about the tech itself. How does this 3D printing actually work?
So at the heart of it all, you have Icon's Vulcan printer. It's this like mobile robot, but it's basically a giant computer-controlled concrete extruder.
Right.
And it follows a digital blueprint, obviously, and lays down the lavacrete with like incredible precision. You actually included articles from Dwell and Arch Daily, and they go into all the really cool technical details. But what I think is really fascinating is the software that controls it all.
Yeah.
Like, it optimizes everything from layer thickness to curing time, to make sure those walls are super strong and crack resistant.
Crack resistant, huh? That's always been a big concern of mine with concrete in general.
Yeah, you're right. Cracking is a potential issue with any concrete structure.
Yeah.
But Icon kind of addresses this in a couple of ways. They use, a mix of software and engineering. The software helps to minimize like stress points in the design.
Yeah.
And they also incorporate reinforcement within the walls themselves. And they actually use sensors to monitor the curing process to help prevent too much cracking.
So it's not just about the robot spitting out concrete, right? There's a lot of intelligence that goes into this whole process.
Yeah, definitely.
But even with all this fancy tech, it still sounds pretty labor intensive.
Right.
You've got to program the robot, transport the materials, and I imagine there's still a lot of finishing work that needs to be done once the walls are up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. 3D printing isn't about like eliminating human labor completely. It's more about changing the nature of the work. You still need those skilled tradespeople for things like roofing and plumbing, electrical, all the finishing touches.
Right. So it's more of a collaboration then between robots and humans.
Yeah.
Which actually brings up a question that I think a lot of our listeners are probably wondering about. Affordability. We keep hearing about how 3D printed homes are going to, be a solution to the housing crisis. But is that really the case?
Well, that's where things get a little more interesting. And maybe a little more complex than some of the headlines suggest. You included this great YouTube video from Shelby Church, where she actually tours a development of 3D printed homes in Austin, Texas. It's called Wolf Ranch. And these are the homes that Icon has been promoting as like their more affordable option.
Okay, so what's the price tag on these affordable homes?
Well, the starting price at Wolf Ranch is $475,000. So not exactly chump change, right? And what Shelby points out in her video is that when you break it down per square foot, these homes might actually be slightly more expensive than traditionally built homes in the same area.
Wait, more expensive? I thought the whole point of 3D printing was to like make construction cheaper.
Yeah, I think that's the assumption a lot of people make. And to be fair, the printing process itself, it can reduce some labor costs and waste. But as Icon's co-founder Jason Ballard explains in the video, there's this whole ecosystem of factors that contribute to the final price of the home. You've got land costs, material costs, permitting fees, regulatory hurdles, all those kinds of things, which are obviously outside of Icon's control.
Right. So it's not as simple as robots build houses, houses become cheaper.
Right.
There's a lot more at play here.
Exactly. And I think this is where it's really crucial to look beyond just the hype and understand all the nuances. Affordability isn't just about the cost of construction. It's about, the entire housing market.
So maybe 3D printed homes aren't like the instant solution to the housing crisis that some people are making them out to be. But surely there must be some other advantages besides potentially lower construction costs, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. There definitely are. And this is where I think 3D printing really starts to shine. In fact, in her video, Shelby Church, she highlights several benefits that might make you rethink that price tag.
Okay, let's hear it. What are these game-changing advantages that make 3D printed homes worth considering, even if they're not exactly bargain basement prices?
Well, for starters, they're incredibly energy efficient. Concrete has this amazing property called thermal mass, which basically means it absorbs and releases heat really slowly. So in the winter, that helps to keep the house warm. And then in the summer, it helps keep it cool. And then on top of that, Icon actually adds foam insulation to the walls too, making these homes even more energy efficient. Shelby mentions one homeowner who had an energy bill of like $25.
$25, that's practically unheard of. Okay, so energy efficiency is a big one. What else?
Durability. Remember that homeowner who described their house as a fortress? Well, they weren't kidding. Concrete is super resistant to like termites, fire, wind damage, even earthquakes. Icon actually built homes in Mexico that withstood a 7.4 magnitude earthquake.
Okay, now we're talking. Energy efficiency, incredible durability. It's starting to sound like these houses are built for the apocalypse. But what about aesthetics? Are we all going to be living in, like, concrete boxes?
Actually, that's another really interesting thing. Remember we mentioned Bjarke Ingels earlier? Well, his firm, the Bjarke Ingels Group, they designed the homes at Wolf Ranch. So we're not talking about cookie-cutter boxes here. These homes actually have a really distinct modern aesthetic with curved walls and like unique features.
Curved walls, that's pretty cool. I have to admit, I was picturing something much more, well, boxy. But hold on, let's go back to this whole concrete thing for a second. One thing that's always worried me about concrete is cracking. It just seems like that would be a major issue with 3D printed homes.
Yeah, you're right to be concerned about cracking. It's a potential issue with any concrete structure. But Icon addresses this in a couple of ways. First, the lava-crete mix itself is designed to minimize cracking. And second, they use a lot of reinforcement within the walls, which helps to distribute stress and prevent cracks from forming.
So even if there is some cracking, it shouldn't be a structural issue.
Exactly. And any minor cracks that do appear can be easily patched. In the video, Jason Ballard actually explains that they go to great lengths to make sure the concrete cures properly, which also helps to prevent cracking.
This is all incredibly fascinating, but so far we've mostly been focusing on Icon and their projects in the US. Is this just like a niche thing happening in Texas, or is 3D printed housing more of a global phenomenon?
Oh, no, it's definitely a global movement. You included this fantastic article from Dezeen. It really highlights, just how widespread this is becoming. We're seeing 3D printed housing projects popping up everywhere, from Europe to Asia to Africa.
So it's not just about, quirky concrete houses in Texas. This is a global trend. What are some of the most interesting projects happening around the world?
Well, there's this company in the Netherlands that's 3D printing entire apartment buildings using this bio-based concrete. They're even experimenting with incorporating recycled plastic into the mix.
Wow. So we're not just talking about different locations, but also different materials and applications.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just housing, too. There's a team in Italy that's 3D printing pedestrian bridges out of recycled plastic. And in China, they're using 3D printing to build entire schools in disaster-stricken areas.
So it sounds like 3D printing is really starting to disrupt the construction industry, on a global scale. But with any disruptive technology, there are always concerns about, the potential downsides. And one of the big ones that comes to mind is jobs. If robots are building our houses, what happens to all the construction workers?
Yeah, that's a really valid concern, and it's something we need to be thinking about very carefully. But like we saw earlier, 3D printing, it doesn't completely eliminate the need for human labor. It's more about shifting the types of skills that are needed.
So it's not so much about robots replacing humans, but rather changing the way we work together.
Precisely. Instead of, swinging hammers and laying bricks, construction workers might be operating the 3D printers, maintaining the equipment, troubleshooting software issues, things like that. We'll probably see a demand for new skill sets, like programming, robotics, digital fabrication, things like that.
So rather than mass unemployment, we might see a need for retraining and upskilling the workforce to adapt to these new technologies.
Exactly. And that's a conversation we need to be having now at the early stages of this technology's adoption. How do we prepare the workforce for this shift? How do we make sure that everybody benefits from these advancements and not just the companies developing the technology?
That's a really crucial point. Technology should be a tool for progress, not a cause for displacement. But let's move on to another kind of big question that often comes up with new technologies, the environmental impact. Concrete production, it's known to have a pretty significant carbon footprint. Does 3D printing make that worse? Or could it actually be more sustainable than traditional construction methods?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think researchers are still trying to fully understand. On the one hand, you're right. Concrete production is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. But 3D printing does offer some potential environmental benefits that we should consider as well.
Okay. How could 3D printing actually be better for the environment?
Well, for one thing, it can significantly reduce waste. Traditional construction, generates a lot of excess material that ends up in landfills. But with 3D printing, you're only using the exact amount of concrete that's needed. So you're minimizing waste.
So less waste means less material going to landfills, which is always a good thing. But what about the energy consumption of, these massive 3D printers? Aren't they kind of energy hogs?
Well, they do require energy to operate, of course. But remember, those printers are also replacing a lot of the traditional construction equipment, which also consumes energy. And as the technology advances, we can expect those printers to become more energy efficient as well.
Right. So it's kind of a trade-off. You might be using less energy in some areas, but more in others.
Exactly. And there's another factor to consider, too. The energy efficiency of the buildings themselves. Concrete structures with their thermal mass. And the potential for incorporating insulation. That can actually lead to lower energy consumption over the lifetime of the building.
So it's a complex equation with a lot of different factors to consider. It sounds like we need more research and data to fully understand the environmental impact of 3D printed construction. Oh, absolutely. We need to look at the entire life cycle of these structures, from sourcing the raw materials to the eventual demolition or recycling of the building. It's not just about the construction process itself, but the long-term environmental sustainability.
Yeah. We've talked about jobs and the environment, but there's another layer to this that I think is important to address, the ethics of it all. I mean, we're talking about robots building our homes. That raises some pretty big questions about what it means to live in a world where machines play such a crucial role in shaping, our built environment.
You're absolutely right. This goes beyond just the practicalities of construction. It touches on, our values, our sense of what it means to be human, our relationship with technology, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. If robots are building our homes, who gets to decide what those homes look like? Who benefits from this technology? How do we make sure that the advancements are serving the common good and don't just exacerbate existing inequalities? These are huge questions. And honestly, there are no easy answers. But there are questions we need to be asking ourselves now. As this technology develops, it's a reminder that, innovation isn't just about technological progress. It's about shaping a future that aligns with our values and our aspirations.
Well said. We can't just blindly embrace new technologies without considering their broader impact on society. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the actual experience of living in a 3D printed home. What's it like on a day-to-day basis? Are there any surprises or challenges that homeowners encounter?
That's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in, the technology and the big picture. But ultimately, a home is about how it feels to live in. You actually included this really interesting video from Icon. It features testimonials from actual homeowners living in 3D printed homes. It gives us a glimpse into what it's really like.
Okay, so what are these homeowners saying? Are they raving about their futuristic dwellings, or are there some unexpected downsides?
Well, overall, the homeowners in the video, they seem genuinely happy with their 3D printed homes. They highlight a lot of the advantages we've already discussed. The energy efficiency, the durability, the unique aesthetic. One homeowner, an engineer, even talks about the thrill of feeling like they're part of a technological revolution, living in a home that's, pushing the boundaries of construction.
It's fascinating to see how people connect with the technology behind their homes. It's not just a house. It's a statement about embracing innovation and being part of something new.
Absolutely. And for some homeowners, that sense of novelty, of being on the cutting edge, that's a major draw. But it's not all about futuristic living either.
Yeah.
The homeowners also talk about the practical benefits, the lower energy bills and that sense of security, knowing that their homes are built to withstand extreme weather.
Yeah, in one of the other videos we watched, a homeowner described their 3D printed home as feeling like a bunker. It seems like that sense of security and durability, it's a recurring theme. But let's be realistic, right? No home is perfect. Are there any downsides or unexpected quirks that homeowners have mentioned? After all, we're still dealing with a relatively new technology here.
You're right. 3D printed homes, they aren't without their challenges. One thing that comes up in the testimonials is the learning curve associated with living in a concrete structure. For example, hanging pictures or mounting shelves. That requires different techniques and hardware compared to traditional drywall.
That makes sense. Concrete is a lot denser and harder than drywall, so you can't just hammer a nail in wherever you want.
Exactly. Homeowners need to be aware of those differences and be prepared to kind of adapt their DIY skills accordingly. But it's not insurmountable. The homeowners in the video, they talk about using special concrete screws and anchors. And once you get the hang of it, it's really not that much different than working with other materials.
So it's more about just adjusting your expectations and being willing to learn some new tricks. What about the aesthetics? We've talked about curved walls and modern designs, but can these homes feel, I don't know, a bit cold or sterile with all that exposed concrete?
That's a valid concern. And it's actually something that Shelby Church addresses in her YouTube video. When she tours the model homes at Wolf Ranch, she mentions that the concrete walls, they can feel a little industrial, especially in the smaller bedrooms where you're closer to the surfaces.
So how do you warm up a concrete bunker?
Well, Shelby suggests using warm paint colors, textiles, and furniture to kind of soften the look and create a more inviting atmosphere. She also points out that the curved walls, which are like a signature feature of a lot of 3D printed homes, they actually help to break up the monotony of the concrete and add a sense of flow and movement to the space.
So it's all about striking that balance between the industrial chic and the cozy comforts of home. It sounds like there's a lot of potential for creativity and personalization in these spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's so exciting about 3D printing, because the technology allows for so much customization. Homeowners can really put their personal stamp on their homes. They can choose from a variety of textures, colors, finishes. For the concrete, they can incorporate unique architectural features,
right,
like those curved walls or built-in shelving. The possibilities are really limited only by your imagination and, of course, your budget.
This all sounds incredibly intriguing, and I have to admit, I'm starting to get a little bit of 3D printed home envy myself. But for those of us listening who might be, seriously considering making the leap, what are the key takeaways? What should we be thinking about before we, sign on the dotted line for a robot-built home?
That's a great question to wrap up with. First and foremost, do your research. Don't just buy into the hype. Understand the technology, the pros and cons, and the potential challenges. Talk to homeowners who have already made the leap. Learn from their experiences.
And second,
think about your lifestyle and your needs. Is a 3D printed home the right fit for you? Are you comfortable with the aesthetics? Are you willing to adapt to the unique aspects of living in a concrete structure?
Finally.
Consider the bigger picture. We've talked about the potential of 3D printing to address affordability and sustainability. But those are, long-term goals.
Yeah.
The reality is that right now, 3D printed homes, they aren't necessarily cheaper than traditional homes. And the environmental impact, it's still being debated. So be realistic about your expectations and make an informed decision based on your individual circumstances.
It's been an incredible journey. Exploring the world of 3D printed homes, we've learned about a technology that has the potential to completely revolutionize construction, create homes that are stronger, more sustainable, more adaptable to our changing needs. But it's also clear that this is really just the beginning of the story. As the technology continues to evolve, we can expect to see even more innovation, more creativity, and hopefully a future where everyone has access to, safe, affordable, and sustainable housing.
You said it. It's a future worth building.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of 3D printed homes, and that you're leaving with a sense of wonder, a touch of skepticism, and a whole lot of food for thought. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. We've talked about, the potential upsides and downsides of 3D printed homes, but let's get down to brass tacks here. What's it actually like to live in a house built by a robot?
That's the question I find most intriguing, honestly. All the tech specs and the global trends are fascinating. But at the end of the day, a home is a very personal space.
Right. It's where you hang your hat, literally. So let's tap into those firsthand experiences. We have that video from Icon featuring homeowners who are, actually living in these 3D printed homes. What are they saying? What's life like inside those concrete walls?
Well, one thing that really struck me was the sense of pride these homeowners have. It's not just a house. It's like they're living in the future. One homeowner, an engineer, he talked about how much he enjoys explaining the technology to guests. It's a real conversation starter.
I bet. It's like living in a piece of art. that also happens to be incredibly functional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And speaking of functionality, the homeowners also rave about the energy efficiency. Several of them mentioned, significantly lower utility bills compared to their previous homes. Remember those thick concrete walls and all the insulation we talked about?
Yeah.
They really make a difference.
And let's not forget about the durability, too. I'm picturing these folks feeling pretty smug when, a big storm rolls through.
Oh, absolutely. One homeowner in the Icon video, she said she no longer worries about hurricanes or tornadoes. That peace of mind it's priceless, especially in areas that are prone to extreme weather.
But let's be real. No home is perfect. Did any of the homeowners mention, any downsides or unexpected quirks? I mean, living in a concrete structure can't be exactly like living in a traditional house.
True. There are some adjustments. One homeowner mentioned that hanging pictures or shelves was a little bit trickier than a drywall house. You need special anchors and screws. That can handle concrete.
Yeah, that makes sense. Concrete's definitely not as forgiving as drywall when it comes to DIY projects.
Right, but it's not rocket science either. Once you get the hang of it, it's manageable. And on the plus side, you never have to worry about putting your fist through the wall.
True. Speaking of walls, what about the aesthetics? Can you make a concrete house feel, warm and inviting? Or is it always going to feel like a bunker?
That's a good question. Shelby Church, the YouTuber who toured the Wolf Ranch development, she talked about how the concrete walls can feel a little stark and industrial, especially in smaller rooms. But she also pointed out that with the right paint colors, textures, and furnishings, you can create a very cozy and inviting space.
So it's all about finding that balance between the modern industrial look and the warmth of, a traditional home.
Exactly. And remember, 3D printing allows for so much customization. So homeowners can really personalize their spaces. They can choose different concrete finishes, add unique architectural details, even incorporate recycled materials. The possibilities are kind of endless.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the nuts and bolts of the technology to the global trends, and even the very personal experience of, what it's like to actually live in one of these 3D printed homes.
It's incredible to think that we're at a point now where robots are building houses. It feels like we're on the cusp of a major shift in how we design and construct our built environment.
And as with any major shift, there are, challenges and questions that we need to address. But the potential is truly exciting. Imagine a future where everyone has access to safe, affordable, and sustainable housing, thanks in part to this incredible technology.
A future where creativity and sustainability, they kind of meet to shape the homes of tomorrow.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of 3D printed homes. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this fascinating topic with us. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep diving deep.